Gents, we've got a very special episode today. Your usual host will be the special guest this evening, guys. There's a very good reason as to why we'll be having this show as well, and why we have such a special guest this evening as well. You will understand what I'm talking about in just a couple of minutes. So before I begin, guys, please welcome the showstopper and your ever-loving host, Mr. Sandro Satyajit, who will be our guest this evening.
Hi everyone, and thank you for moderating for us, Dinit.
No worries at all, Sandro. I'm happy to be here. And thank you so much for having me as well. And guys, there's another very important thing I need to mention. Confetti events. Confetti events has been basically the lovely best friend that you never had. They've been the biggest supporter for Sandro throughout his Dear Sincerely Sandro program throughout the time of its existence. They've been of massive help and support. From guiding, teaching, they've been one of the best partners that Sandro has ever worked with, and he wanted to make sure that I put it out there and truly thanked Confetti Events, which will now be going global. They'll be named Confetti Global from here onwards. Their mission, their plans, everything is being expanded. They're up to a lot of big things. So do stay tuned, Confetti Events, as well as stay tuned with Sandro, because he has a lot of new plans, ideas that he'll be bringing to light in the near future as well. So, without taking any more of your time, guys, let's move into a few budding questions that all of you might have had throughout the recent past. Number one, Sandro, why did you start this show, the YouTube show that's renowned throughout Sincerely Sandro?
Thank you, Dinit, for that question. I think it's with a lot of love and a lot of a heavy heart that I am telling that we have to leave sincerely, Sandro, and we'll be wrapping things up. But as to why I started the show, if I do tell all of you, it's because Instagram has always been where Live with Sandro was, and that concept, I felt like it was while it was good, it was still very narrow to that audience specifically. And YouTube, on the other hand, is a very different thing, and it's a very broader thing perspective. Because if you take Google and if you take YouTube, you would know that people often use YouTube as an alternative search engine, and most of the time a primary search engine for a lot of the things that they want to look about. It may be advice, it may be anything in general. People love to Google rather than Googling things up. As much as they love Googling things, they also love YouTubing things, if I may. And that made me want to get, or rather attack a bigger audience with the love and the beauty of that show, the same energy, but with a different scale. So I'd say Sincerely Sandro was supposed to scale up, and it did quite a lot at the beginning and during the past two to 3 months, if I'm not mistaken, that we've 2 to 3 months we've been here. And it's been a great journey, but that is the whole concept of Sincerely Sandro. And the whole point, the wording itself, Sincerely Sandro, was to tell all of you that this is a show where the guests, and not just the guests, everyone who's a part of this, including my good friend Santosh from Confetti Events and Dinit who's here, and every guest who's been here, for it's a message of love, it's a message of inspiration, it's a message where you will be delivered with the best that you need to make sure you go ahead with your life. And that is the whole concept, all of that wrapped around in a small letter, one episode of YouTube on every month. That was the plan. And in that letter, sincerely brought to you by Sincerely Sandro with Confetti Events. So that was the concept behind it. And I think you've seen it as well. And I think the guests perform the biggest task in bringing out their stories. So it's a same platform, bigger scale, to bring out their stories and to make sure, as I always try to actually at least inspire one person in the audience to make sure that their life ends up for the better after hearing someone's story. So that's the plan.
And Sandro, so here's the thing, like when COVID struck, a lot of people took it upon themselves to start complaining, start saying, okay, this is a very terrible situation we are in. And they felt hopeless. But it's amidst all of this that you came up with Sincerely Sandro, but most importantly, the show that gave you the idea to build Sincerely Sandro as well, Live with Sandro. That's how the majority got to know you. That's how you started communicating with a lot of guests, bringing them on your show, adding a lot of value to society. So what's the story behind Live with Sandro?
Live with Sandro started last year during the beginning of the pandemic in Sri Lanka, especially, where the lockdown, the country was under full lockdown back then. Nobody was out and about. Everyone was on social media, nothing to do. Most people often, praising around, they were bored out of their minds. And being a compier, you must definitely understand that being a compier yourself, it was a very difficult shift for all compiers in Sri Lanka, I have to say. Switching from that offline, the normal physical structures to the online shackles that we sort of got into. So what I thought was, I'm a compier. I normally do that. Why not do that on a live? And rather than just talking to many people, let's talk to two people. Let's two people talk and make a genuine conversation, because I found in it that when I normally talk to people, I ask a lot of questions from them, very curious like that. And I think that makes me sort of a inquisitive person in that sense. And sometimes the right questions bring out, people like being asked the right questions. So when these conversations, most of the time, you obviously know more than anyone, happen in private, where I talk to people, connect, make connections. But then Live with Sandro's concept came from that. Why don't I do this on a larger scale, on an Instagram show, where people get to engage with us while we do exchange our stories? It's just a very chill chat. And everyone who's come on Live with Sandro, including very famous people like Amanda, or even Fahad Farooq, or even people like yourself, and you've been there as well. You already know this. So, and even from those high, like very famous people with those stories, including yourself, to also those who are up and coming, like young musicians. So I remember interviewing this very young kid. He's just starting his music back then. Now he's growing even more. So these people who are just starting, because I wanted to show that Live with Sandro wasn't this show where you can only come if you're eligible, if you have if you built something. No, it's a place where everyone can come to share every perspective of their story. And with that story that they build, anyone watching can get inspired. And I have gotten hundreds of messages after all the 70 to almost 80 plus interviews that I've done during the past year. And it's made a huge impact, brother. And to be very frank, that is why Live with Sandro will continue to go on, despite Sincerely Sandro being stopping from today onwards. But that is our concept behind that, to make sure that people be inspired by the stories of others who will come to us, who will come and watch these small conversations that just happen on a very random. I'm not an interviewer there. Like if you watch Live with Sandro, you know that I'm not like, hi, good morning, good evening, this is your question. No,
you basically
none of
just
that.
have a conversation with them, build something up with them. That's how it goes. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just a very simple conversation. And I mean, isn't that what people want? To find natural things in a world where we're all bound by structures. So that's why I started that Live with Sandro.
But one thing that actually caught my attention was consistency, Sandro. Because a lot of content creators especially struggle with being consistent. Now, your idea when you started it off, it was something very new. We weren't used to the whole webinar sort of thing. We weren't used to seeing interviews done online. It was all live shows, right?
Yeah.
Well, did you come across any challenge, especially when it came to consistency? I mean, this is something that's always bugged me as well. I'm sure a lot of people that are watching also have this question, especially if they're in the content.
Sure. For sure, that's the thing. So I've asked this question from some people as well. What they tell is, rather, when they see it as a job, especially those who have a primary method of earning from their consistency of social media content, etc., they do it. And that generates, obviously, the only way to ever develop your brand on any social media is putting out consistent content like wildfire. But also, I'm not saying, if you're starting off, I'm really not going to say that it should be refined and beautiful at the start. Because if you go back to my Instagram feeds, nothing is refined. I mean, you've seen all of that, brother. You
were a very avid fan of Gary Vee, Sandro. I remember him pushing the idea. It's about speed,
Yeah.
So much you can put out. It's not about the quality exactly per se, but the quantity of it.
Yeah.
If you can get it across several platforms, if you can get people familiar with you.
If you're starting, yes, quantity over quality. But once you keep progressing, you have to focus on quality. There has to be a fine balance, brother. And I think you're one of the few people who definitely brought me insight to that also many years ago. Balance, And I think people should put out content, but at the same time, they should worry about the quality, because as I went on, there were a lot of shout outs coming in. Why don't you put a shout out? And to a point that I told them, okay, let's not do this because you're not going to get any followers from this. Why don't you send me a package of what you're selling, and I'll buy it, and then I'll do a promotion for you. Not paid, I'm just a customer. Like quality over the quantity of things you do. That's just another example. But in the general sense, I've been putting out content for a long time. And even right now, I can proudly say, if you Google my name, all of my social media platform links come up. And that's because of that consistency. But consistency is not easy when you don't love what you're doing. So that's the hard part. If you don't genuinely love helping people, for me, every time I pick up the phone, it's always, I'm going to inspire at least one person. And that keeps me going. Sincerely Sandro, Live with Sandro, all the way. I hope that answers your question.
No, it definitely does, Sandro. And speaking of balance, one thing that came to my mind was another thing that I really admired about you is how you balance your education, your extracurriculars, and all the other work that you do as well. And most of your followers also, I was just doing a bit of background research, and I realized all of them were quite younger than us. They are in their teens at the moment. And I'm pretty sure they're struggling with it too, because while we were schooling, we had these issues, especially balancing things out. Could you maybe share your thought on that?
Definitely, brother. So I think when it comes to balance, there comes a point, not just one point, many points where everyone sort of loses balance. And it's a whole game there. So I think I'm not a perfectionist in that way, but I always try to keep my balance always. I think if managing is your problem, I always tell it's not a magic trick. Use Google Calendar and use a notepad for yourself. I think that's the best way to manage yourself. But at the same time, it's up to you. I think the perspective that you have on yourself kind of matters there. When it comes to you, do you see yourself as somebody, as just a person who's just sitting there, like life happening to you? Or do you see it as something else entirely? For me, I see myself as a business. I see myself as, okay, there's Sandro Satyajit, but then there's the guy running it. And for me, it's like I have my own personal meetings, 1-hour meetings where I plan the week. And I plan, everything else. And so it's like a CEO meeting, but then once everything is scheduled, that you schedule everything. But once you schedule it and that time pops up on your phone, you get to work like an employee, right? You're employed by yourself. So it's like two roles that you play. So for me, that trick has worked so far. Before Google Calendar, of course, during school, you couldn't use that. It was just me and a notebook. But then it evolved into a Google Calendar, and it's been just like that, work, life, and definitely free time in between to engage with the family and to have a chat, to have some off time with some friends. It's most of the time that is always planned, but if time does allow, it's also impromptu. But nevertheless, that's how the planning part works. Study is included in all of this. But I wouldn't be someone who'd really talk about that because I'm not very proficient in the balance of studies quite a lot. But I could say that during my A-level years, I did have a beautiful balance in studies and in taking part in over 7 clubs at school. So I think that balance sort of set in, but it's just the other hurdles that will always keep coming, but you still keep going. The balance, it's okay to be imperfect there, but remind yourself, you're human at the end of the day, and you can try again better tomorrow.
Sandro, let's say somebody actually was trying to, incorporate balance in their life and they suddenly fell back on it. All right, they probably had a day where they just didn't want to do anything because, mental health is also a big topic these days, right? People are actually starting to give it the value it deserves. People are putting their spotlight on the subject, discussing it more. So in terms of that also, you could have a pretty terrible day. You wouldn't even know the reason why. And you would just want to roll up on bed. For individuals like that, what sort of advice would you have? Like, because young kids mostly, they reach out to me as well and they say, okay, it's like this. I do want to make change, but I don't know what to do. So for individuals like that, do you perhaps have a message?
If you don't know what to do, the best message is, you've definitely heard this from me multiple times, as I must have told you too. How do you know avocado is your favorite drink if you don't drink it? Like, that's something I always say. If you have to keep testing things out as much as you can, and trust me, Dinit, you hold a big testimony for that. I've tried a lot of things and crazy things, and to the point that it took me a while to get to what niche that I want to go into. In a way, I'm still figuring it out. But if it's any consolation for anyone who has that question and anyone who's watching, you almost never figure it out because it's always a journey. And it's a journey of, okay, this might be it. Let's go there. You get better at it. Okay, you like it. Or, it's always like that. But with regards to mental health and how you always have, how we degrade our mental health because we are lost and we don't know what to do, I'd say it's okay to take rest and Netflix and chill or take some time off. It's always good to do that. But while you do that, try to come in terms with what you're feeling, because strength is weakness that has set its prayers. Once you accept the feelings that you have, with whether it's weakness, whether it's, you're lost, whatever it is, heartbreak, anything. Once you've accepted it, you have to make a comeback, because self-love isn't the Netflix and chill self-love that people talk about. Self-love is actually doing the things you hate the most, but that will make you improve in the long term. It might be, you might not want to work out, but that's self-love. If you work out, you're going to feel better. and then you're going to come out of it much better. You're going to feel, because you, more than anyone, know you're an athlete. Your cortisol levels go down, HGH comes up, and it makes you confident. All those depression and all, it's while it's chemical and psychological, things like that help you. Doing